My name is Thyra Root. I am a Japanese language and literature major, and my project is From Harry Potter to Harry Potta. And I studied the Japanese translation of the first book in the Harry Potter series. And the question that kept popping up as I was doing my research and working on this project was actually, what is the role of the translator? And what I found was that there were kind of two schools of thought. Either the translator as a communicator, they're kind of like the equals sign in a math equation, or kind of like this, this device that I have circled up on this slide, kind of like they just receive input and just need to spit something back out. And then the alternative was the school of thought that they actually have a much more creative role, much less dry and mathematical. And in my project, I look at two translators. The first ended up being myself. I translated the postscript to the first book of the series. It's something that Japanese translators do. They can explain, like, this is why I chose this project. And this one was titled A Love Letter to Harry. And it was very much a letter. It was not a novel. And so I found myself thinking, yeah, I think I feel like I fall into that school of thought of translator as communicator. I was trying to get across a timeline and facts and dates. And then I looked at the translator of Harry Potter, Yuko Matsuoka Harris, and she had a lot of personal resonance with Harry Potter. She started translating it soon after her husband passed away, and so she hoped that if people looked at what she was doing and at this project, they would actually think wow, no matter what happens in life, or if you feel like you get knocked down, you can get back up and keep going. And she just had a lot of emotional involvement. One of the quotes I think that really got this across was, she said, "This was it, a book heaven itself had given me." She saw that bringing Harry Potter to Japanese readers was her mission, at least for this portion of life. And I expected almost a more embellished kind of version of Harry Potter, or even just more pizzazz in the translation because of this incredible amount of emotional involvement. But do you all know the kind of when you're reading a book, you have kind of this mental movie playing in your head? And I found when I was reading the Japanese translation, I was seeing the exact same movie. There was nothing about it that it was just more than the English. And so as I was doing this, as I was doing all this research, doing this project, I found that the enterprise of translation, it really had so much to do with even the themes that I was pulling out of Harry Potter. I chose three that I will show you soon. I chose them because I was approaching Harry Potter, the impetus for this project was looking at Harry Potter through the lens of world literature. And then the other side to it was I was also trying to think about, yes, world literature, also how has it had an impact in the world? And I found a report that actually said that millennials' political opinions were actually very much affected by Harry Potter. And so one of the first theme that I chose was multiculturalism. The scene that I chose to kind of illustrate this from the one scene that I chose was when Albus Dumbledore, who most of us probably know, but he is Harry's mentor. He is someone who is one of his strongest allies. And right in the beginning of the novel, J.K. Rowling decided to start it with him saying, offering someone else a lemon drop or a lemon sherbet. And it shows he is a wizard, but he completely accepts and even enjoys Muggle culture. And this I found really had to do with translation, because translators, they need to put aside their own preconceived notions. They need to be able to not come at something that they're reading and translating. They can't come at it with judgment or even ignoring anything that makes them uncomfortable, because they need to be able to appreciate differences and actually get across the points that someone else is trying to say. If you change it, the underlying truth is going to be different. You're going to be trying to write something that has a different underlying truth. The second theme that I pulled out was resisting authority, which also came from the survey about millennials. And this one, so definitely we see like Harry, Ron, and Hermione running around after curfew. But the scene that I chose to study in my project was Ferenzi, a centaur. He chose to go against the centaur's tradition of just reading the stars, interpreting the future, but not interacting with the world and trying to change the future. He goes against that tradition, totally braves rejection to stand up for what he believes in. And I found that this parallels translation because sometimes translators actually do need to make a choice. What the author said here, it needs to needs to change. Like for this particular project or my readership, I need to make a different decision. An example from my experience was I came across this little phrase that I was trying to translate, and all I could think of was a blessed day, but it just didn't seem like it was something that someone would say just in English today, like in our age. Luckily, and so I was like, I'm just going to omit it. It's not that important actually to like what I'm trying to get across here. Luckily, my advisor pointed out, nope, you can maybe just say like a fine day. And I was like, oh, that's true. So I put it back in. But the last theme is surrogate family. We totally see Harry, like he is an orphan, and when he comes into the wizarding world, he builds really strong relationships that kind of stand in as surrogate family. But like I said, the impetus for this project was actually studying Harry Potter as world literature, and it was a work of world literature that I found had the closest parallels to like translation and this theme of surrogate family. So the Tale of Genji, I'll let you read the kind of background information about it as I tell you more about the plot. The Tale of Genji, so Hikaru Genji is this exiled prince who has an affair with his stepmother at a rather young age, and she leaves him and kind of like leaves the world because she is ashamed and afraid of this kind of getting out. And ever since then, he's just been on a search for another relationship, another person who will fulfill him that much. And yes, there is a parallel with translation. A translator, at least in the case of Matsuoka Harris, she really felt something, experienced something when she read Harry Potter, and she wanted to bring that to other people. And so she may have known, like, I can't even translate this perfectly. It's going to be a slightly different creation, because that's kind of what translating does, but I'm going to do it all the same. And so in conclusion, what I found with my project was that literature, it really does, it instills values. It has a lot of power. And I found that it was like all the more important because we are in a global society. The world's becoming smaller every day. And so understanding translation it's key, and it's going to play like a larger and larger role as like all of these different cultures and communities just become closer and closer. And I definitely felt that even though it started out with me feeling like, no, I'm just a communicator, I'm just kind of like that device, that little equals sign. At first, by the end of my project, I definitely felt that translating is much more about creating. It's about having like an interaction with what you're reading, and you are creating something different when you're translating it into a different language. It's kind of inherent in the process, and it doesn't mean that the underlying truth is any different, but it is a different creation, and you can celebrate that. And that is my project. I'd like to thank my advisor, Professor Vincent, and I will take any questions.
So in the program, you mentioned that reading Harry Potter as a child is correlated with the development of specific political values later on. Was that consistent, at least in the West anyway, was that consistent in Japan also?
That's what I really wanted to study, but I wasn't able to find like that type of study hasn't been done in Japan. And so I was trying to come at it from the point of like, can I tell from the way like that Harry Potter comes across in the Japanese? Like we pick up so much about those themes from just like those little bits of dialogue and the way that characters interact with each other in the English. And so I wanted to study, is any of that any different in the Japanese? But like I said, the translation, like when I was reading it, I felt like I was having the exact same experience as reading the English. And so it didn't seem to be coming across any different. I would say it instills the same values in the Japanese the exact same way as it does in the English. There are different it's a different culture, so it might have a different type of impact, but it's the same story. It has the same underlying truths. Yes?
Is there any accident or is it real determined? Sorry. Was it planned that the authors of your 2 books were women?
Oh, no. No, that was not. Yeah, that's one of the most fascinating things. The Tale of Genji is the first novel, and it was written by a woman, and so the Japanese language department touts that around. Like, yes, we have a woman who wrote the first novel, but yeah. All right, yes.
Do you think that translating different pieces of art like can detract from maybe like the story? Like, do you think that you can also translate poetry and it have the same effect as like translating Harry Potter and that having the same effect? Because you said you had the same experience reading the Japanese version, you said,
yeah,
than like the English version?
Yeah, I think a good thing to use to answer that question is the Tale of Genji. There are lots of poems within the prose. And so definitely when I was reading the English translation, I had to, there would be footnotes, like this is what this actually means and this is what's actually going on in the Japanese. So there definitely is a lot lost in translation. I think especially when it does come to things like poetry and the way the Japanese works. Like I said, like translating is a creating process. You're creating something different. I do believe that the underlying truth can stay the same, but yes, the way it comes across is going to be really different, especially when, like for instance, a word in Japanese can, say one thing and also say something else. And so that won't come across if you just translate it into one word in English. And so you need, the footnotes, you need to understand that, the first language. So, yeah, there's lots of tricky stuff kind of wound into it. But I hope that answers your question. Yeah, okay. Great. All right, I think I'm out of time. So thank you all.